Love isn't always simple, and passion often comes at a price. Welcome to Intrigue Romance, where secrets, betrayal, and forbidden desires collide. Tonight, we take you into a story you won't forget, where love is never what it seems. Sophie Carter stood at the edge of the Brooklyn Bridge, her arms crossed tightly against the cool evening breeze. The city skyline sparkled in the distance, the lights reflecting on the water below. She'd come here to clear her head after another long week at work. At 25, Sophie was juggling a demanding career as a graphic designer and the weight of living up to everyone's expectations, her bosses, her friends, and even her own. The bridge had always been her thinking spot. There was something about the mix of movement and stillness, people passing by, cars humming in the distance, and the river flowing steadily beneath, that grounded her.
Tonight, though, it felt different.
She couldn't shake the restlessness in her chest, a longing for something she couldn't quite name. Lost in thought, Sophie barely noticed the tall man standing a few feet away until he spoke. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" Startled, she turned to see him. He was striking, tall and broad-shouldered, with deep brown skin that glowed under the soft orange light of the street lamp. His eyes were warm and inviting, and his smile carried a hint of curiosity. He wore a leather jacket over a simple black shirt, a look that was effortlessly cool. "Yeah, it is," Sophie replied, her voice steady despite her surprise. "I come here all the time when I need to think," he said, stepping a little closer but keeping a respectful distance. "I'm Chris, by the way." Sophie. They shook hands briefly, and Sophie felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. Chris seemed genuine, the kind of person who could turn a simple conversation into something meaningful. "What brings you here tonight?" he asked. Sophie hesitated, unsure if she wanted to share the heaviness she'd been carrying. But something about Chris made her feel like she could. Just needed some air. "Work's been stressful lately." Chris nodded knowingly. "I get that. I'm a photographer, and sometimes I feel like I'm always chasing the next thing. It can get overwhelming." They talked for a while, their conversation flowing naturally as they leaned against the railing. Chris shared stories about his travels, how his work had taken him to places like Morocco, Italy, and Japan. Sophie, in turn, opened up about her love for art and how she'd always dreamed of visiting Paris to see the Louvre. As the evening grew colder, Chris glanced at her. "You know, there's a jazz lounge not too far from here. They've got great music and a cozy vibe. Want to check it out?" Sophie hesitated, but only for a moment. She'd come out tonight seeking something different, and maybe this was it. "Sure," she said with a smile. The lounge was everything Chris had described, dimly lit and intimate, with a band playing smooth jazz on a small stage. They found a table near the back, and Sophie ordered a glass of wine while Chris opted for whiskey. As the music played, their conversation deepened. Chris spoke about how photography had taught him to see the world differently, to find beauty in unexpected places. Sophie shared her frustrations about her job and her fear of losing her creative spark. "You know," Chris said after a moment, "sometimes you need to step back to see the bigger picture. Maybe you're too close to the canvas." His words struck a chord with Sophie. She'd been so focused on meeting deadlines and pleasing clients that she hadn't taken time to reflect on what truly mattered to her. By the time they left the lounge, it was past midnight. The city had quieted down, and the streets were almost empty. Chris offered to walk her home, and Sophie accepted, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. As they strolled through the city, Sophie realized how much lighter she felt. Chris had a way of making her see things differently, of reminding her that life wasn't just about work and responsibilities. When they reached her apartment building, Sophie turned to Chris with a smile. "Thank you for tonight. I didn't realize how much I needed this." Chris smiled back, his eyes soft and steady. "Sometimes, the best nights are the ones you don't plan." They exchanged numbers, and Sophie climbed the stairs to her apartment, her heart buzzing with a mix of excitement and curiosity. She didn't know what would come of their encounter, but for the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful. That night, as she lay in bed, Sophie thought about Chris and the unexpected connection they'd shared. She didn't believe in fate, but maybe some meetings were meant to happen. And maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something new.